Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1991 drama JFK. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brian for requesting this review. If there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, JFK is a film that I was aware of, but I never really got around to watching it until recently for a request, because the running time was really daunting. It was over 3 hours, and I don't have a problem watching 3 or 4 hours of multiple movies in a row, but when it comes to like one film, maintaining my interest for that long, that's a pretty daunting task. So I was looking at the running time and I was like, eesh, I don't know. I don't know about that. 3 hours and 25 minutes? Really? And what was surprising to me is that this film went by at a good pace. I wasn't bored by it. The 3 hours and 25 minutes went by pretty quickly. And that's because this is a really well made, well put together, engrossing, engaging drama. It is undoubtedly a work of fiction, despite the fact that it's loosely. I mean, loosely is probably not the right way to put it, but despite the fact that it's based on the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the investigation that occurred afterwards, this is very much a work of fiction, because there's a lot of things that are exaggerated, there's a lot of things that are straight up fabrications in order to create a compelling and entertaining narrative. And I think for some people that's a turnoff, and I can understand why. But I think if you can look past that and just see this film as what it is, a work by Hollywood of a fictionalized account of what might have happened if there was a legitimate conspiracy when it comes to the death of John F. Kennedy, I think there's a lot to really appreciate and genuinely admire about this film. I think in recent years the film has become a punching bag by people because Oliver Stone has been doing a lot of stuff on Twitter and coming across like a total kook. And as a result, I think some people are looking back at this movie and punching down at it. And, I understand why some people aren't a fan of the film, but I don't understand why people would hate this movie or say that it's outright trash nowadays because of Oliver Stone's current views. Whether or not you believe in the conspiracy or not, this is a damn good movie. This is a film that has a phenomenal cast, honestly one of the best casts ever. The direction is inspired. It's genuinely brilliant. However you feel about Oliver Stone and his politics and what he says on social media, you have to admit that this is a guy who really knew how to direct films. And this film is no exception. I mean, this is some of his finest work. And you can tell that he was very passionate about this project. Yeah, maybe a little too passionate, because there are some moments where it gets a little preachy, not to the point where it's like shoving it down your throat, but there are some moments where you're like, okay, we get it. We think you revere JFK as this amazing figure, this flawless hero. I understand, okay. And then the kind of the way that he interprets Garrison is also very similar to that. And then how he just really lays it on pretty thick in terms of the fact that he believes that what he's showing in this film is the truth and not just a fantasy for Hollywood. and for audiences. And so there are some moments where the film can be a little grating because of that. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I was not captivated throughout the entire movie. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Oliver Stone didn't do a spectacular job directing it. I mean, there's some really great shots in this film in terms of use of slow-mo and use of the camera in terms of how it moves and drifts and flows throughout the film in terms of the different perspectives and the different angles and the different styles of shooting. It's a really great film from a directorial standpoint. And the script, it's got a few issues, mainly ones that I've already mentioned here. The script by Oliver Stone and Zachary Sklar. It's based on a couple books, on The Trail of the Assassins by Jim Garrison, and Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy by Jim Marrs. And those are not non-fiction. Well, they're trying to be non-fiction, but what I meant to say is they are not fiction novels. So they are intended to be non-fiction works that are more of exposés or essays or stuff like that. So to take those and to turn them into a screenplay, that was a really hard thing to pull off. And I think both of them just knocked it out of the park for the most part, in terms of taking bits and pieces from those books and throwing them into a narrative and just making something that is just very, very captivating and very engaging and consistently strong throughout in terms of maintaining your interest and also making you think about a lot of things, about maybe JFK was killed by the CIA. And I think it helps that I've always had an open mind about this particular conspiracy. And if I were pressed to essentially say how I feel about it, I would say that I believe that there was some conspiracy involved when it comes to the death of John F. Kennedy. I don't necessarily believe that it occurred exactly how it is shown in this film, and I don't have a problem with people who feel that Oswald worked alone and that's just the way it is, but I just think there's a little more to it, and I'm not going to go really in depth on that because I'm not as informed on the conspiracy theories or the instance where Oswald is the one that did it. I'm not really as informed with this particular case and the assassination of John F. Kennedy as much as other people are. So I'm not really going to sit here and talk that much more about it. I do know that there's a lot of stuff in this film in terms of the script that are complete, utter fabrications. Ferry never had a freak out moment in the hotel. In fact, Ferry went to his deathbed saying that he had nothing to do with JFK's assassination. I know there are a lot of other moments that are just made up for the film. For instance, the scene where Garrison meets with Mr. X on the park bench. That never happened. And there's a lot of other inconsistencies and a lot of other things that don't really connect with reality. But I look at this as a film, as a work of fiction, inspired by the truth, inspired by reality. I don't look at it as reality. I know Oliver Stone has some moments where he tries to say that that's the case, but I think even he knew that this was not 100% accurate. I mean, there's no way that he could not have known that. He helped write the screenplay. He knows that Mr. X never met with Garrison. That never happened. He seems to know a lot about the history and the facts. So I don't buy that he was not aware or cognizant of the fact that there was a lot of stuff going on with this film. It was very embellished. And to be honest, when it comes to these kind of films that are inspired by or based on a true story, I always look at them as something that is going to be embellished in one way or another in order to create a enjoyable and entertaining movie. Because let's be honest, folks, history can be kind of boring and pretty dry. And sometimes you have to do a lot in terms of making it something that is genuinely entertaining to watch and keeps your interest, especially for a film that's as long as JFK. And I think the screenplay did a really remarkable job at doing that, detailing all these different things that led up to his assassination and the investigation by Garrison and his crew into the conspiracy and all these different people that are involved. And there's a good use of quotes and just some really great writing for a lot of the characters in the film. There's a whole sequence that essentially is like the last hour of the movie is a courtroom scene. And I was just completely 100% glued to the screen. And a lot of it was just Kevin Costner and his character just talking about why he felt that JFK was assassinated by his government. It was just a very compelling and just absolutely stunning sequence to watch, and a big reason for that is due to the writing. I mean, just some really excellent writing by these two writers to take a lot of wordy dialogue, a lot of exposition, and to make it so genuinely great and fun to watch. I mean, there's the scene with Mr. X, which is just a terrific sequence, and there's just a lot of it. It's just mainly exposition. It's just Mr. X talking about all these things that happened leading up to JFK's assassination, giving Garrison information on who he is and what he was doing for the government, and it's just some really compelling, powerful stuff. And this film has a ton of characters. It's loaded with characters. And unlike other movies that have so many different characters when it comes to the plot, I feel this film genuinely excels when it comes to really making all these characters feel important, feel like they belong, and it has the right amount of focus on the strongest characters. So there are some moments where it does have a little bit of an interview with a character that doesn't show up again, but they still have their place, and it doesn't feel like there are any extraneous characters that really don't need to be there. Even the ones that are really there briefly or only for a few scenes, they are still there to help move the plot along. They're still there to provide some more evidence or to provide a different perspective. So there are always characters involved, even besides the main ones, that really do continue to keep your interest. And that's a sign of a great script, to take so many different people and to still create something that is very consistent in terms of quality. And the main characters in particular, with Garrison and his team and the people who his team are investigating for a conspiracy, those are the main focus of the script. And the way that the screenwriters handle everything involving these characters is really inspired, and I think it's something that a lot of people should look to when it comes to doing a film that has so many different working parts, so many different characters and to create something that is truly special and truly noteworthy. Because it does. It just consistently keeps you invested. And there's enough backstory, there's enough character development, there's enough character moments, there's enough scenes to really get a bead on who these characters are and what they stand for. And it just makes for a film that just keeps you really interested in what's going on. And despite how great the direction is and how genuinely excellent and fantastic the script is, I mean, this film would not be on the same level without such a phenomenal and just absolutely top-notch, top-flight cast. I mean, Kevin Costner's Jim Garrison, his kind of hokey accent aside, this is arguably his best performance. The scene at the courtroom where he's breaking down and choking up while talking about JFK and wanting to get the jury to convict Clay Shaw in order to start the dominoes rolling, in order to change history, telling them to not forget their dying king, is an undeniably great performance. And it was an instance where Costner actually got really choked up while saying those lines, and that's not acting. And Oliver Stone didn't yell cut. He didn't ask for another cake. Another cake. I don't know why I had cake on the brain. Cake does sound pretty good. I did have birthday cake today, so maybe that's... I just got cake. I already had cake today, so I had cake on my brain. But anyway, he didn't ask for another take. He saw that this was a monologue that was really moving Costner to the core, and he just kept it the way it is. And that's a sign of a good director, and Costner really buying into everything just made that scene even more powerful and even more strong. And yeah, I really loved the performance by Kevin Costner as Garrison. Is it as realistic when it comes to who Garrison really was? Not necessarily, but it doesn't have to be. This isn't a documentary. Kevin Bacon, he plays Willie O'Keefe, this prisoner who's gay, who is trying to get Clay Shaw to essentially provide some serious evidence to suggest that he is part of the conspiracy because he heard some things. It's a small role, but it's a good one. Laurie Metcalf, she plays Susie Cox, who is I think she's like the assistant to Jim Garrison, who's the DA, and it's another good role for her. She tends to do a lot of these kind of roles where she plays like an assistant to a district attorney, or she plays someone who's like a partner for a police officer. She's a good actress when it comes to these kind of roles. Provides a certain spark to those characters. Makes it so they don't really come across as just a yes woman. It does really seem like she has a very headstrong personality, and she can actually hold her own. Tommy Lee Jones plays Clay Shaw, a very charismatic, very flamboyant, rich guy who was involved with the CIA, and the film is trying to insinuate that he was a part of the conspiracy when it comes to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Gary Oldman, he plays Lee Harvey Oswald, who in this is interpreted in a very different way, in a different light than in other films about the assassination of JFK. Here he's interpreted as someone who is a patsy, someone who worked with the military, was involved with the military, might have been a double agent for the military or the CIA, and he ultimately became the man who was framed for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He became the guy who was just labeled as the only person that was involved in his death. And I know some people believe that's the way it is. That there's a lot of people that don't believe that that's the way it is. Michael Rooker, he plays another member of Jim Garrison's team of investigators. Nice little role for him. J.O. Sanders, he plays another member of the team. Sissy Spacek plays Jim Garrison's wife. She's a phenomenal actress. This is another really strong performance by her. You have Jack Lemmon, who plays a character in this, a guy who works for Ed Asner's grumpy, crotchety, racist, controversial boss, Guy Bannister. Walter Matthau, he plays a senator in the film. He has a brief scene with Kevin Costner and his character on the plane. Yeah, Brian Doyle Murray, who plays Jack Ruby, this mobster, this guy who was involved with the mob, who ultimately, I think he's the one that shot Lee Harvey Oswald. John Candy, he has a very small role in this. Might as well just be a cameo because he's only in it for a couple scenes. He plays Dean Andrews Jr., this guy who initially was friends with Garrison, but then ultimately became a turncoat and turned his back on him during the trial. Really fun performance. It was really nice to see John Candy play a more serious role, and it showcased his range as an actor. I think if he did live, if he survived, if he was still with us, he would have done more roles like this, and I think he would have knocked them out of the park. I think he would have been fantastic in these kind of roles. He did a good job despite him being so nervous that he was just sweating visibly on the screen because he just wasn't used to doing serious roles. And he was acting in a film with Gary Oldman and Kevin Costner and all these big names, all these dramatic actors, and it was directed by Oliver Stone, and he understandably was nervous, and he still was a trooper and still delivered his lines with the same ability and talent that he had showcased in other films and other projects before. And it was just a nice bit of casting, and apparently John Candy was casted in this role because he looked like the real Dean Andrews Jr. And if you look at some photos, yeah, you can definitely see it. So yeah, John Candy. You got Wayne Knight, who plays another guy who works for Jim Garrison. He has very few scenes though. He's not really in it that much. He doesn't really say a lot of lines. Same goes for Pruitt Taylor Vince, who plays Lee. Vincent D'Onofrio plays a character named Bill Newman. You also have Lolita Davidovich, who plays Beverly Oliver. You've got John Larroquette, who plays a talk show host named Jerry Johnson. You have Frank Whaley, who plays the imposter Oswald. And Frank Whaley initially, I think he auditioned for the main character. He auditioned, not the main character of the film, that's Jim Garrison, but he auditioned for Lee Harvey Oswald, but the studio decided to go with Gary Oldman, but they did like his audition enough that they decided to give him the role as the fake imposter Oswald. And you also have Joe Pesci. Can't forget Joe Pesci. He's not in the credits. He's uncredited, which is crazy to me that he's uncredited, but he is. He's in the film. He plays David Ferry, this accomplice of Shaw's. And what's crazy about Joe Pesci in this is that I think this is honestly one of his best acting performances, but it's a performance that is very over the top, but it's something that definitely does tie into the kind of role that he was playing, the character that he was playing, this very loud person. David Ferry is actually a very loud guy in reality, and it wasn't just his hair. Which I got to be honest, I'm gonna say this because it's something that definitely did pop in my head while I was watching this movie for the first time. I'm like, what the fuck is going on with his eyebrows? Like, what the hell is going on with Joe Pesci's eyebrows, the wig? And initially, I was like, this is terrible. I was like, this is a multi-million-dollar. This is a big budget film, big budget studio film with a $40 million budget, and his eyebrows look like shit, and the hairpiece is so obvious that you could see it from a mile away. You're like, what the hell is this shit? And then when you find out that it's actually close to reality, that that's actually the way that David Ferry looked, then you're like, oh, okay, all right, I get it now. And you see that they were trying to make it accurate to the time period. Nowadays, they would do a better job with the hair pieces or with the eyebrows. But back in that day and age, back then, like, it wasn't nearly as polished and as slick looking as it is now. So it's one of those things, once you have the context of things and once you see David Ferry without his hairpiece and without his eyebrows on, you're like, okay, all right, I get it. And I give huge credit for Joe Pesci for being able to just be so willing to be a clown in a lot of ways. That's a very clownish kind of thing to do, to have that really obvious fake red hairpiece and the eyebrows that made him look ridiculous. And he was very game about it. He was like, nope, I'm doing it, and I am going to own this role. And it's a really sterling performance from a great actor. And speaking of great, I mean, this film has some great cinematography by Robert Richardson. The way that it actually recreated entire events that actually transpired, scene by scene, was really impressive, as well as the sequences that were intended to be specifically for the film, because there really was an actual film that they could look at to use as a template for those scenes. I really like the way that the film has certain shots that are in black and white, but then certain scenes that are in color. It's just a really nice looking film, and I felt that the cinematographer also had a really good connection with the director, Oliver Stone. There really weren't a lot of conflicting views between the two, which was really nice to see. I also felt that the film did a really good job looking like it actually took place in this time in history, in terms of the lighting, in terms of the way that the shots were set up, in terms of other elements like the costume design or the art direction. And the editing in this film is excellent. This has some really spectacular, strong editing that is honestly some of the best I've seen, because there's a lot of really complex edits in this, flashing from the past to the present, cutting from one scene to the next in a very unique fashion. One of my favorite edits in this film, and one of my favorite pieces of editing, period, I gotta be honest, after seeing this film, is the scene that edits in some mysterious person faking the photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald holding a rifle. And I just love the way that that's cut together, where you have the guy, the mysterious person, cutting the paper and putting the photo in there, and gluing the head onto it. It was just a really impressive, incredible feat of editing. And there's a lot of moments like that throughout the film that accomplish the same sense of wonder and the same sense of awe just from the editing alone. And that's a big reason why it won the Oscar for best editing. It deserved it, like 100%. It's got a score too by John Williams. And yeah, before I don't think I mentioned the editors. I definitely need to name drop the editors. They deserve all the credit. Joe Hushing, no, it's Joe Hutching and Pietro Scalia. Those two men, they deserve the Oscar. They deserve all the acclaim. They deserve a ton of credit. This film would not be as good as it is without their work and without what they did for this film, which was a lot because there was so much. There was a lot of footage. There was a lot of different things. This film could have come across as kind of muddled or kind of confusing at times, but the editing was done in a way where it's managed to take a narrative that's just so jam-packed of characters and different subplots and different facts and different figures, and made it into something that was very palatable, something that was very easy to swallow. And I think the editing is a big reason why the film moved at such a good pace. I mean, there are a ton of different things that are going on in multiple different sequences, and it just doesn't bog down. I mean, you could easily look at a scene like the meeting with Mr. X. And speaking of Mr. X, I can't believe I forgot to mention Donald Sutherland. My bad. I know some people are like, what about Donald Sutherland? I don't know why it slipped my mind. Maybe it's because he wasn't like one of the first names mentioned on Wikipedia for some reason. Donald Sutherland, he was simply spectacular as Mr. X, as he pretty much always is. Like, Donald Sutherland is one of my favorite actors, one of my favorite character actors, one of my favorite supporting role actors, because he always seems to add something to any film that he's in. He adds this intensity and this genuine earnestness when it comes to the characters that he's playing, whether it's a character who's evil or a character who's a good guy or a character who's kind of in between, like Mr. X. He's an actor who can take a lot of just wordy dialogue, a lot of exposition, and honestly a few words, and just make the most out of them. I've always loved his work, always loved his contributions, and this is another one of those performances that just goes right up there with some of his best. If you want somebody who will leave an immediate impact and a lasting impact in your film with only one sequence, that's the man. That's the man for the job in Donald Sutherland. But going back to another element of the film that is just so excellent and works so well, the score by John Williams. It's a very... I'm trying to think of the right word. It's a score that, unlike a lot of other scores by John Williams, it has a lot of very mysterious notes to it. It's honestly darker than a lot of his other content, a lot of his other compositions, and that's a big reason why I think it's one of his more underrated and one of his best scores. Yeah, it's just so opposite from what you normally hear from him. There's a lot of atonal moments within the composition. There's a lot of stuff in it that really is a little more percussive than what you might see from John Williams. There's a lot of really genuine big risks that he takes with this score that just really do make the film so much more powerful and poignant at times. He knows how to create a sweeping, majestic series of notes, but then he also knows how to create something that kind of makes your blood curdle, like the scene during the confrontation with Mr. X, with Garrison, where he's talking with him and he's telling him about this massive web of lies and this conspiracy that led to JFK's assassination. And it just does a great job unnerving you and making you unsettled. And that's not normally something that Williams is known a whole lot for, to create a score that makes you uneasy and puts you on high alert. And I feel that that's why this is definitely one of his best scores, because it's just so unique when it comes to his work. And I mentioned this early in the film. Early in my review of this film, and it bears repeating. Yeah, it's 205 minutes. It's a 3 hour and 25 minute long film when it comes to the director's cut. The theatrical version is shorter, but it's still 180 something minutes. But it doesn't drag. It doesn't really have moments where it loses your interest, because it's such a compelling, engaging narrative. You sympathize with Garrison and his plight. You want him to uncover this conspiracy. And once he uncovers and unravels all these different things, once he turns up one stone, you cannot wait until he turns up another, because there's just so many things that just fall into place, or so many things that are revealed that just make you go, wow. It's hands down the best conspiracy theory film out there, if you ask me, because it's just so well crafted, so well put together from top to bottom. And I highly recommend it. I really do. Even if you don't agree with the politics, even if you believe without a doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, if you can just look at this as a work of fiction, which it is, I think there's a lot that you can appreciate and really take from this film. Anyway, I don't know what else to say about JFK except thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.